You have no idea who I am, do you? Angela whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The words hung in the air, cutting through the tension of the bustling airport terminal like a knife. Samantha, the flight attendant, froze for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she stared at Angela, still holding the baby in her arms. Angela had been calm, far too calm, even after Samantha had slapped her. The other passengers murmured, a mix of shock and disbelief flashing across their faces. Samantha's grip tightened on the arm of her cart, her eyes flicking to the baby in Angela's arms, then back to Angela's defiant gaze. What are you talking about? Samantha sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. She looked at the young mother, still unsure of why she felt so threatened by this quiet, unassuming woman. Angela didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step back, her eyes still locked on Samantha's. She could feel the weight of the stares from the surrounding crowd, but she remained unshaken. You think you can treat me like this, Angela continued, but you have no idea who you're messing with. Samantha's face twisted into a scowl, a quick, dismissive glance darting over Angela. You're nothing but a tired mother with a baby, just another passenger. You should know your place. She spoke as if she were doing Angela a favor, but the words only made Angela's resolve harder. She could feel the familiar weight of her phone in her pocket, the connection to her husband waiting, but she remained silent. Just sit down, Samantha barked. I'm not going to ask again. Angela looked down at her baby, the soft weight in her arms a reminder of the life she had worked so hard to build. No, she said simply, her voice calm but unwavering. As she stood her ground, she felt her phone buzz against her thigh, the familiar ring-tone of her husband's private line. Her lips curved into a slight smile, not out of amusement, but out of something far more powerful. You don't know who I am, she said again, the words now carrying the weight of something much bigger. Samantha's eyes flickered, but Angela could see the confusion starting to seep into her confidence. She pressed her thumb to the screen of her phone, ignoring the glances of the curious onlookers, and placed the phone to her ear. Hi, James. I need you to handle something for me, she said quietly, her gaze never leaving Samantha. James Carter, CEO of one of the largest airlines in the country. He owned the very airline Samantha worked for, and though Angela had never made her connection to him public knowledge, she knew this call would change everything. Get in touch with corporate. I'm not leaving this airport until I'm treated with respect, Angela continued, her voice steady, like a quiet storm gathering just beneath the surface. Samantha's eyes widened, and she took a step back, suddenly uncertain. Her posture shifted from confidence to something more guarded, as if a truth she couldn't comprehend was beginning to sink in. Angela could see the change in Samantha's demeanor, the moment when the arrogant flight attendant realized the woman she had just humiliated was not who she thought she was. Angela turned her back on Samantha, still holding her baby, her stride purposeful. She could hear the hushed whispers as she walked away, but she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The game had changed, and now, for the first time, Samantha would have to answer to someone far more powerful than herself. Angela stepped out of the terminal, her baby nestled gently in her arms, the sounds of the airport fading behind her. She didn't look back at Samantha, who stood frozen in place, still trying to process what had just happened. It was the kind of situation that demanded an answer, but Samantha was too caught up in her own confusion. Angela's steps were deliberate, but she could feel the stares from the crowd, the whispers building around her. As she moved through the airport, the phone in her pocket buzzed again, and she instinctively reached for it. James, she said as she brought the phone to her ear, her voice steady but filled with purpose. I need you to make sure Samantha knows exactly who I am. I'm not leaving this airport until she does. Her husband's voice on the other end was calm, even supportive. I've got it, Angela, he said, the authority in his tone clear. I'll have someone handle it. Don't worry. Angela hung up the phone and looked around. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on her, but it wasn't fear she felt. It was resolve. The airport, bustling with travelers and commuters, seemed a world away from her quiet, controlled home. But here, in this space, surrounded by strangers, she had found a power she had long kept hidden. A power that was starting to shift the atmosphere around her. As she passed by the gates, she noticed a group of airport staff standing near the coffee shop. They didn't recognize her at first, but Angela could feel their eyes on her, their whispers becoming more pronounced as she walked by. "Did you see her?" one of them muttered. "Who does she think she is?" Another voice replied. "She looks like someone important. Maybe she's just a tourist, though." Angela smiled inwardly, her steps unwavering. She didn't need their recognition. She didn't need their approval. She had never relied on the world's judgment of her. It was this very anonymity that had kept her hidden for so long, and now, it was this very anonymity that was going to make her unstoppable. As she neared the exit, the doors slid open, letting in a rush of fresh air. She was met with the sight of her personal assistant waiting for her just outside, a small but reassuring presence in the sea of strangers. "Miss Carter," the assistant said, nodding respectfully as Angela approached. "Everything's in place. Your husband's team is ready to take action. Samantha won't be a problem anymore." Angela's lips curled into a soft smile, but her eyes remained focused ahead. She nodded, grateful for the support, but more so for the quiet confidence she felt in that moment. "Good," she said, her voice cool and composed. "Now let's get out of here. I've had enough of this circus." As they walked toward the parking lot, Angela's mind wandered back to the scene with Samantha. The woman had tried to humiliate her, to put her in her place as if she were just another powerless passenger. But now, the roles had reversed, and the power dynamic had shifted in ways Samantha could never have imagined. Angela had been the one to hold the cards all along. It wasn't about the money, the power, or the fame. Those were just tools. It was about control, about standing firm in the face of disrespect, and showing the world that no one, not even someone as seemingly insignificant as a flight attendant, could ever take that away from her. The car pulled up, and Angela slid into the back seat, the leather seat cool against her skin. As the door shut behind her, she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. This wasn't just about one moment, one confrontation. It was about something far bigger. It was about the years of silent struggle, the strength she had carried quietly for so long. And now, the world was starting to see her for who she truly was. As Angela sat in the back of the car, she watched the city pass by through the tinted windows, her mind still processing the events at the airport. The weight of the moment was starting to sink in, but it wasn't the confrontation that lingered. It was the feeling that had been building inside her for years, the sense of power she had almost forgotten she possessed. Her phone buzzed again, the familiar ringtone signaling another message from her husband. She glanced at the screen. "Everything's taken care of. Samantha's on her way to the HR office. They'll be briefed about her behavior." Angela nodded silently, her grip tightening on the phone as she replied, "Make sure she understands what's at stake. I don't want this to happen again." As the car made its way through the busy streets, Angela's thoughts drifted back to her earlier life. The years of quietly supporting her husband's empire while balancing the role of a mother, a wife, and a woman who, despite her intelligence and capabilities, had chosen to remain in the background. It hadn't always been easy, living in the shadow of her husband's success, but Angela had never sought the spotlight. She had known her time would come, and today, that time had arrived. The car slowed as it neared her home, a sprawling estate nestled in the hills overlooking the city. As the gates opened, Angela couldn't help but smile. The house had always been a sanctuary, a place where she could recharge and reflect. But today, it felt different. There was a new sense of purpose within her, a realization that she had more control over her life than she had ever allowed herself to acknowledge. The driver stopped at the front steps, and Angela stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the stone walkway. She paused for a moment, taking in the familiar surroundings, the perfectly manicured lawn, the grand columns that framed the entrance, the soft rustle of the trees in the breeze. It was her world, a world she had built and maintained, and today it felt like it belonged to her. Inside, the house was quiet, the usual bustle of household staff replaced by a calm, almost eerie stillness. Angela moved through the halls with purpose, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. She entered her study, where the weight of the day seemed to settle on her shoulders. The door clicked shut behind her, and she sank into the plush leather chair at her desk. For a moment, she simply sat there, allowing herself the time to reflect. The events at the airport had set something in motion, something she couldn't ignore. It wasn't about the power her husband held. It wasn't about the money or the influence. It was about her own strength, her own ability to stand up for herself, even when the odds seemed stacked against her. She had been underestimated for so long, and now, the world was starting to see her for who she truly was. The phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a message from her assistant. Samantha's been removed from her position. We've also set up a meeting with the board for tomorrow to address the incident. Angela smiled, but it was a smile filled with a quiet confidence. She wasn't just playing the game anymore. She was in control, and for the first time in her life, she knew exactly what that meant. The power wasn't in the title or the money. It was in the ability to make decisions, to stand tall, and to never let anyone tell her she didn't belong. Angela stood up from the desk, walking over to the window that overlooked the sprawling estate. The view was breathtaking, but it was the future that filled her thoughts now, a future where she was no longer the shadow of her husband's success. She was her own person, ready to take on whatever came next. She knew there would be challenges, but she was ready for them. Because in this moment, Angela Carter had taken her power back. Angela sat in her study, her eyes tracing the lines of the city skyline visible through the large windows. The evening light cast a soft glow over the sprawling estate, but her mind was far from the serenity the view offered. She had come so far in her life, but today had been a turning point, one that she knew would change everything. She thought back to the moment when Samantha had slapped her. In that instant, Angela had felt the years of silent struggle rush to the surface. But it wasn't just the slap. It was the realization that she had been hiding her strength, her power, for far too long. Angela had spent years building her life around her family and her husband's career. She had sacrificed parts of herself, kept quiet when she should have spoken up, all for the sake of maintaining peace. But not anymore. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up to find a message from her husband, James. The board meeting is set for tomorrow at 10 a.m. We will address the incident with Samantha. You know how to handle it from here. Angela smiled as she read the message. She didn't need James to tell her how to handle it. She had spent years learning the ropes, observing the power dynamics at play. She knew what needed to be done, and she was more than ready to take charge. Tomorrow would be the first step in reclaiming her place, not just as James's wife, but as a force to be reckoned with. As the evening stretched on, Angela reflected on the path that had led her here. She had always known she was capable, but self-doubt had held her back. It was easy to let the world tell you who you were, especially when you had everything to lose. But today, everything had changed. Angela stood up and walked over to the window, her gaze focused on the horizon. She had always loved this view, the way it seemed to stretch out forever, offering a sense of possibility. Now, that same feeling of endless potential washed over her. She could do anything. She could make anything happen. And she would. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie, and she turned to see her assistant standing in the doorway. Miss Carter, everything is in place for tomorrow. Your team is prepared, and the board is expecting you. Angela nodded, her mind already shifting gears. Good. Let's make sure they know who I am. It's time they understood that. I'm not just a figurehead. Her assistant gave a small, approving smile. Of course, Miss Carter. Angela walked past her, moving with purpose. She had spent so many years playing the role of the supportive wife, the quiet observer. But no longer. Tomorrow was the start of something new. She had waited long enough to step into her own power. As the door closed behind her assistant, Angela felt a surge of confidence. She wasn't just ready for tomorrow. She was ready for whatever came next. The world had always underestimated her, but now, they would see her for who she truly was. The woman who held the cards, the one in control. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning arrived, and with it came a sense of purpose that Angela had never felt before. She dressed carefully, her outfit a reflection of the power she now carried within herself. A deep navy blue suit, sharp and professional, paired with simple, elegant accessories that exuded confidence without drawing unnecessary attention. Today was the day she would make her mark. As she stepped into the grand conference room, she could feel the weight of the moment. The room was already filled with the board members, a mix of men and women in expensive suits, their conversations hushed as they glanced up at her entrance. For years, she had been an invisible figure in this very room, the woman who stood behind the scenes. But today, everything had changed. Angela walked to the head of the table, where her husband usually sat, and took her seat. The room went quiet, and all eyes were on her. They had never expected her to take this position. They had never imagined that the quiet woman who had always supported her husband would one day be the one leading the conversation. Angela cleared her throat, her voice calm and authoritative as she addressed the room. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her tone steady. "Today, we need to address a matter that is not only about one employee, but about the culture we are fostering in this company." She paused, allowing her words to settle in. The room was still. She could feel the tension rising, the realization hitting them one by one that this meeting was unlike any they had attended before. "Samantha Roberts," she continued, her eyes meeting those of the board members, "disrespected one of our passengers in a way that is unacceptable, and it goes beyond just one incident. It is a reflection of a larger issue that we need to fix. This company is built on respect, professionalism, and integrity. If we cannot uphold those values, then we have nothing." The board members shifted in their seats, some exchanging uneasy glances. Angela had their full attention now. "Samantha's actions were not only unprofessional," Angela continued. "They were a direct violation of the principles we claim to stand by. And as the head of this company, I will not tolerate it. This is not just about one flight attendant. It's about every single person who works for this airline and the standards we set." There was a moment of silence before one of the board members, a middle-aged man in a dark gray suit, spoke up. "But, Angela," he said cautiously, "Samantha has been with the company for years. She's been a loyal employee, and this incident, while unfortunate, might not warrant such drastic action." Angela's gaze hardened as she responded. "Loyalty does not excuse bad behavior. We cannot allow one person's actions to define the culture of this company. If we let this slide, what message are we sending to the rest of our employees? That disrespect is acceptable? That bad behavior will be ignored as long as someone has been around long enough." She let the question linger in the air, her words a challenge to the complacency in the room. The board member who had spoken earlier was silent now, his expression shifting as he processed Angela's words. Angela turned her attention to the rest of the room. "I have already spoken to HR, and Samantha will be removed from her position. But this is just the beginning. We will implement a new training program for all employees, focused on respect, equality, and professionalism. No one is above the values we uphold here." The board members nodded, some in agreement, others still unsure. But Angela didn't waver. She had made her decision, and she was ready to stand by it. As the meeting continued, Angela spoke with authority and conviction, outlining the changes she intended to bring to the company. By the time the meeting ended, the room was quiet, each person processing what had just happened. Angela stood up, gathering her notes, and made her way to the door. The room remained still, but she knew something had shifted. Today, she had taken control of her destiny, and there was no going back. The days following the board meeting were a whirlwind for Angela. News of the changes she had made spread quickly throughout the company, and she could feel the shift in the atmosphere. People who had once overlooked her were now watching her closely, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and respect. It wasn't just the removal of Samantha that had caught everyone's attention. It was Angela's decisive leadership and the strength she had shown in making the difficult calls. It was a new era for the company, and Angela was at the helm. As she sat in her office, reviewing the new training programs and company policies, she felt a sense of satisfaction. She had always known she was capable, but it wasn't until recently that she realized just how much power she held. It was a revelation, and it wasn't just about the company. It was about her own journey. Her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. She looked down at the screen and saw that it was a message from James. "I've been hearing good things about the changes you're implementing. The board is impressed. You've got them listening now. Keep it up." Angela smiled, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. This was what she had worked for. Not just the respect of the board, but the ability to shape the future of the company. She was no longer just the supportive wife. She was a leader in her own right. Later that evening, Angela met with James at their home. He looked up from his paperwork as she entered, his face lighting up with a smile. "I heard you've been making waves at the office," he said, his voice warm but tinged with admiration. Angela sat down beside him, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. "It's been a busy week," she replied, "but it's worth it. I'm finally doing what I've always known I was capable of." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, his words carrying the weight of years of support and partnership. Angela looked at him, feeling the connection between them deepen. It wasn't just the external success that mattered. It was the mutual understanding and respect they had built. Over the years, they were a team, but now, Angela knew that she was standing on her own 2 feet as well. The conversation shifted to other matters, but Angela's mind lingered on the events of the past few days. The power shift at work was only the beginning. She was ready for more. The world had always told her where she belonged, by her husband's side, quietly supporting his vision. But now, Angela had found her own vision. She had her own goals, her own direction, and the confidence to pursue them. The next morning, Angela returned to the office with a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just walking in her husband's shadow. She was carving her own path, one decision at a time. As she entered the conference room for another meeting, she noticed the change in the way people regarded her. It wasn't just the board members or employees, it was everyone. She had earned their respect, and with that respect came a new kind of power. Angela was ready for whatever came next. She had proven to herself that she could handle anything, and now, the world would see her for who she truly was. A force to be reckoned with. The weeks that followed Angela's bold decisions were filled with change, both within the company and within herself. As she moved through each day, a quiet sense of strength settled in her, like a new layer of armor she had never known she needed. The employees who once whispered behind her back now looked at her with a mix of respect and uncertainty, unsure of the woman who had stepped into the leadership role so seamlessly. Angela embraced this new role, her confidence growing with each passing day. She attended board meetings with poise, her ideas cutting through the noise of corporate politics. Every decision she made seemed to echo her newfound power. This was her company now, and she would make sure everyone knew it. Despite her growing influence, Angela found herself alone more often than she had expected. The isolation didn't come from a lack of support. Her husband, James, had always been her strongest ally. But the truth was, no one truly understood the weight of what she had taken on. She had always been in the background, the supportive wife, the silent partner. But now, she was expected to lead, to make decisions that could affect thousands of lives. It was a heavy burden, one she carried with grace but never without thought. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings and conference calls, Angela found herself in her study once again, staring at the city skyline through the same large windows. The lights of the city twinkled beneath her, and for a moment, she let herself breathe. The office had been a battlefield, but tonight, it was just her. Just Angela. She had earned this peace. Her phone buzzed again, the familiar message from James lighting up the screen. "I'm proud of you, more than you know. You've done something incredible." She smiled at the message, but the truth was, she was proud of herself, too. The journey she had started, the one she had been too afraid to take for so long, was only just beginning. As she leaned back in her chair, her thoughts drifted back to the early days, when she had been unsure of her own worth. The woman she had been then seemed like a distant memory now, someone she hardly recognized. She had grown in ways she never imagined. The weight of leadership no longer felt suffocating. It felt like power, like control. The realization washed over her that this was not just a career shift, it was a personal transformation. Angela was no longer just James's wife or the quiet observer. She was a woman who had found her voice, her purpose, and her strength. The next day, Angela arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose. As she entered the boardroom, the faces around the table were different. There was no more doubt, no more questioning of her authority. She had earned their respect, and now they all knew it. The meeting was productive, but Angela found herself thinking less about the business at hand and more about the personal journey that had led her here. She had spent so many years supporting others, playing the role of the behind-the-scenes partner, but now, she had become the person everyone looked to for answers, and she was ready for it. The day ended with a quiet dinner at home. James sat across from her, his usual supportive smile on his face. "You're incredible, Angela. I always knew you had this in you," he said, his voice warm with admiration. Angela smiled. Softly, her mind replaying the events of the day. She had done it. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was more than just a partner in her husband's success. She was a force to be reckoned with in her own right. And the best part? This was only the beginning. As the weeks passed, Angela continued to assert her leadership in ways that left a lasting impression on the company. Her decisions were bold, yet calculated, and the results spoke for themselves. The company's productivity had increased, and employees began to work with a renewed sense of purpose. Angela had created a culture where respect was the foundation, and it wasn't just the employees who noticed the change. The media picked up on the story of the woman who had taken control of a multi-million-dollar corporation and made it her own. Articles praised her for her decisiveness and intelligence. In boardrooms across the city, whispers of Angela Carter's transformation spread, and soon, the quiet, supportive wife was known as one of the most powerful women in business. Yet, despite the accolades and the newfound attention, Angela remained grounded. She knew that she had only just begun. She was no longer concerned with the validation of others. Her satisfaction now came from knowing that she had found her own voice, her own identity. She was proud of what she had built, but she was already thinking ahead, planning for the next challenge. One evening, as Angela walked through the halls of her home, she was struck by the sense of calm that had settled over her. The house, which had once been filled with the chaos of balancing family life and business duties, now felt like a sanctuary. She had finally found balance. As she entered her study, she was greeted by a familiar sight: her desk, papers neatly arranged, a cup of tea sitting by her side. For the first time in years, Angela didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt at peace with where she was. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back to reality. It was a message from James. "I've been hearing incredible things. You're not just changing the company, Angela. You're changing everything. I'm proud of you." Angela smiled at the message, a quiet pride swelling in her chest. She had come a long way. The road had been hard, filled with moments of doubt, but each of those moments had shaped her into the leader she had become. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about the woman she had become, the woman who had found her place in the world. That night, as Angela sat on the balcony, the cool breeze brushing against her skin, she looked out at the city below. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had overcome, and how much more she had yet to achieve. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was living in someone else's shadow. She was living her own life, on her own terms, and that was enough. The future was hers to shape, and she was ready for whatever came next. Angela knew that this was just the beginning. She had found her power, and now, there was no stopping her. The months that followed Angela's transformation were filled with new challenges and triumphs. The company was thriving, and Angela's leadership was no longer questioned. She had earned the respect of her peers, the trust of her employees, and the admiration of those who once underestimated her. She had become the figurehead she had always dreamed of, but it was more than just the external success that mattered. It was the internal peace she now felt, the peace that came from knowing she had found her true purpose. Angela spent more time with her family, finding balance between work and home life. She had built something that was hers, and she knew it was only the beginning. Her relationship with James had deepened. There was an unspoken understanding between them now. James had always been her partner, but now they were equals, each supporting the other in their respective roles. It wasn't always easy, but Angela knew that together they could face anything. One evening, as Angela walked through the garden in the backyard, she paused to admire the flowers that bloomed with the season. The air was cool, and the quiet of the night was calming. It was a moment of stillness, a rare gift in the midst of everything that had happened. She had worked hard for this, for the life she had built, and for the person she had become. Her phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. She looked down at the screen and saw a message from one of her colleagues. "The new project proposal is a hit. Everyone's excited about the future." Angela smiled, feeling a sense of pride. The work she had done was making a lasting impact. It wasn't just about the business. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would leave a legacy. As the days passed, Angela continued to lead with confidence, her vision clear and unwavering. She was no longer afraid of the challenges ahead. She embraced them, knowing that each obstacle was an opportunity to grow, to become better, and to continue building the life she had always wanted. The future was bright, and Angela was ready to take it on. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was capable of more than anyone had ever imagined. She was no longer just a wife or a partner. She was a leader in her own right, and the world was starting to see her for who she truly was.